Welcome to my podcast story, the show where podcasters share the real journey behind their voices, from their first mic check to their biggest milestones. Every episode reveals the lessons, challenges, and breakthrough that shape a podcast star's journey. I'm your host, Wisdom Okonkwo, and I can't wait for you to hear today's story. Today's guest is someone who's quietly changing how we think about podcasting, content, and even conversation itself. GL Palmer isn't just someone who has hosted and produced podcasts. She's someone who stepped back and asked the deeper question: why do most conversations feel forgettable? After years in the space, she realized that more content doesn't create impact, better conversations do. Now she helps creators, founders, and hosts move beyond surface level interviews into moments that actually connect, the kind people remember long after the episode ends. If you've ever felt like your content is getting lost in the noise or your interviews aren't hitting as deeply as they could, this
Thank you for
conversation is going
having
to
me.
shift how you think about everything. Welcome to the podcast, yeah. Yeah, I wanted to start the interview with a very formal question. I say formal because it's usually the questions you get asked when you go to conference and you meet strangers that you
And is that
possibly
your
would
question?
love to connect with, and they're like, "Oh, what do you do? Tell me
Wonderful.
about yourself."
So I do believe that podcasting is like networking
Yeah, that is my question.
on steroids. So definitely when you go to a conference, it's the same idea. You're there to meet people. You're there
Wow.
to connect with people you want to continue to get to know better or even maybe do business with. And that's a perfect question. So I'm in a bit of a transition. And right now I'm offering to do podcast audits for podcasters so that they can take a look at what they're doing in podcasting and see what might be working, what might not be working, how they can improve a conversation. And so they can put out content, for lack of a better word, that is actually memorable long after the podcast airs.
Wow. I'm curious, you use the word memorable, and in the context of
Well, as we
podcasting, what
know,
does
there's
memorable
lots of
feel,
moments in
look,
a
or possibly taste
podcast,
like, or
and
sound
those
like?
moments make memories if we let them. A lot of people skirt over many of the things that actually connect and create humanness in a podcast. They edit too much of the human out, or they only pull out content that they think is going to monetize or leverage their social platforms. And what really connects with people are those moments like we had earlier that wasn't necessarily recorded, where we have a real conversation and we really allow
Yeah,
ourselves to just
yeah,
pause when it's necessary and share various different things that make us human.
yeah. Wow. And this is happening, and people, because it's even common out there where you see people ripping off content, right? And I say this because there is no longer any originality. You see someone say the 10 ways to do X, and then someone else does the 10 ways to do X, and you're seeing different pieces of content that sound
Yeah.
alike, and it's just like the faces
It's
of the people are changing, and
copycat,
you're wondering
cookie
what's
cutter
happening. There's
type
nothing new.
of distribution of what is actually in a podcast. And I find it too polished, too perfect, too professional, and very performed.
Yeah. It has always been important for human connection, with a show and a podcast, to have something that's authentic. Before we started recording, you mentioned that you took a break from podcasting for
Right.
about 2 years, and you're coming back. I'm curious, am I the first interview you're doing since you began this how do I put it now? How do I phrase the question? Am I the first interview you're doing since after this 2 years? I don't know if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
So when I was podcasting, I didn't do too many guest interviews. I think I only did about a handful. And
Okay.
this is the first that I'm doing coming back. And
Yay! Welcome back.
as a guest, I haven't done the actual hosting one yet. And
Yeah.
depending on when you air this, it may air before, but I'm not sure yet. Um, So yeah, I took a risk. I know we talked about some of the concerns I have, and we'll work through them together.
Yeah,
And but yeah, I'm taking a risk and getting back out
yeah. I have so many questions to
there.
ask you.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it's crazy because, we talked about this earlier on. I didn't find so much, when I did the research about you, but I was like, that's awesome. So I get to actually ask questions out of a place of curiosity rather than, oh yeah, that's true. I saw this song online. What's the stuff? And I'm like, oh yeah, I really don't know anything about you. It's like when you're meeting someone the first time and you're like, oh yeah, tell me about yourself. And it's like, yeah, you're actually curious and you're asking questions because you care. And if you don't care, there'll be no questions because you're like, oh yeah, that's boring.
Well, I love this too, but I did say that I had done my homework before becoming a
Yeah,
so
yeah, that's
I I like approaching it from the point that we don't know each other and we're getting to know each other. That is the point of every interaction.
yeah,
And there is so much out there now online where you can data mine everything that's out there,
yeah.
know almost too much about somebody, and so that the questions don't actually come naturally.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. You're back after 2 years, and you're doing these guest interviews, and you mentioned that you're doing podcast auditing, and you also mentioned you're starting your podcast sooner or later. I want us to address the podcast auditing. Tell me about the business.
Well, it's just I've gone through a transition, so it's just
Okay.
up and coming, and right now I'm building the case studies. So on LinkedIn, I put out a blurb about what everybody's doing about encouraging people to post more content on more platforms, and yes, that has a purpose, and it's called repurposing, where you take
Yeah,
your podcast and you um, break it down into bite-sized clips and content that can go out. But if your podcast doesn't have what connects with people in it, doesn't matter where you're putting it.
you can't turn. You're not repurposing is not alchemy. You can't turn terrible content to great content by repurposing.
There you go. I mean, if you're doing it wrong, you're doing it wrong. And don't get me wrong, I don't like that word. That wrong word is not, but there are ways to do it so that you're actually creating engagement, you're entertaining, you're actually
Yeah,
connecting with someone, you're helping them feel, you know, you're embracing the mistakes, you're actually receptive to whatever gem presents itself in the conversation.
yeah,
And so I look
yeah,
for those moments in podcasts and say, this piece is not getting enough attention. This podcast might not be getting the views that it could. Oh, and maybe because you're keeping all your best content behind a paywall, right?
yeah,
Instead of
yeah.
sharing it out there. And those are many things that I look for, but I'm actually creating it. So I offered to do podcasts for free. I think on my LinkedIn profile, I actually shared that I would do 3 for free, and then I'll build case studies and offer the service to podcasters so that they can see, what the podcast was, maybe what the content was that was going out versus what gets created after I do the audit.
I'm curious on how many people took you up on the offer.
Well, I've got the 3. I just have to get them done. And
Do
I'm
you did you
debating.
already know the 3 people, or they just like saw you complete stranger in the internet and was like, oh yeah,
No, I
let's
already knew
work.
them. This is my what they call warm network.
Oh wow, that's lovely.
Yeah.
And how long will this case study run for?
Well, the case studies just need to be built to show, what's possible, right? So I've offered to do 3. Um, you
Okay.
know, but as relationships develop, I mean, there's always options to do, I mean, I have the right to do whatever I want to do.
Yeah, I think I'll rephrase my I think I'll rephrase my question. Usually, I'll give an example. Let's say you wanted to help farmers who grow what's a common, you know, cocoa, right? What they use for making chocolate,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. You unless you want to work with farmers to grow cocoa and stuff like that. You know, there's a time cocoa would take for actually grow to actually see those results and then actually say, okay, yeah, this is the case study we did from working together, right? So in the same thing with the podcast, I'm curious, how long would it take to actually start seeing what's possible for these case studies you're working on? That's the question I asked previously.
So I love cocoa bean, by the way. I actually eat it raw, like
Wow.
unwrap the brown and chew on it every morning. Um,
Wow, it's crazy.
yeah, and it has me wanting to go to the cupboard to grab some. But I think it's an evolution. You know, you start wherever you're at, and then I like to evaluate once a quarter. So take a look at what I'm doing and what's out there and maybe what I need to change every quarter. You know, and then once you get past your first year, like you are, congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
You know, you can go back through. How many episodes do you have now, Wisdom?
Hmm. How many episodes do I have?
You don't know how many episodes you have.
I know I have over 100 episodes.
So are they all on Spotify?
Yeah, they are on Spotify. Let me check. Why you yeah.
Well, let's see who we have a race here to see who gets to it first.
My internet. I need to win this race. Oh, what's going on? Spotify is just not loading. Okay, yeah, it's 135.
Okay.
Oh,
So this would
oh,
be where we would go back and have a look at what you've already done, right?
yeah.
Especially like quarterly, you're growing, you're building, but you have your 1 year, 5 year, 3 year, 10 year plans. But I think a measurement every quarter is necessary in every year.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is. It is. And it's a good thing you mentioned that now because I'm like, yeah, I need to start um tracking the important core metrics that matter to the reason why I started the podcast in the first place.
And I don't believe they're everything that you need to measure. So that if you don't mind KPIs and views and subscribes and downloads, I can view your podcast, I can listen to it, and I don't necessarily have to be a subscriber or
Yeah.
download it. So they don't measure everything.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
what
the reason I say I brought that up is that contrary to it's good we're talking about contrarian ideas about what's possible in podcasting versus what's the traditional norms. When I talk about metrics, I'm not necessarily looking at the conventional metrics like, oh, how many views did I get?
yeah,
I'm looking at things like, okay, oh, the past 1 year, how many people sent me messages telling me, oh, the message really, I love the podcast. This is what really was really great. And, like those feedback you got, I'm tracking those things, right? And to actually see, okay, this is what I'm actually doing. And, I'm actually making an impact. And, versus, I got 10,000 views. And so, I mean, I don't know.
and so are you where are you finding those messages? Are they emailing you directly? Because I know you have an email list, but are they
Yeah.
messaging on platforms? Like, because can we message on Spotify?
Oh,
Well,
Spotify. Yeah, the Spotify has the comment feature. They can leave comments on Spotify.
yeah.
They can also respond to my email when I send emails. They can also what's the third one? They can leave reviews on the platform on Apple Podcasts,
Yeah.
Spotify, right, and amongst many other things. So I'm looking at we talk about podcasting being networking as as networking on steroids, and one
Yeah.
core thing I'm looking at is the guest because everybody's measuring listeners, listeners, listeners. How do I grow my listeners? And I'm also how do I measuring my the conversations I'm having with the guest? What's the review they leave for me? What's the experience like for them, right? So that I'm like, okay, yeah, how can I make it better? How can I make it easier for the guests? Earlier on, we were talking about how we could work on the voice and all that, and I'm really concerned to like how do I make it easy so that when you come on the podcast, it's like what's the example I could give now? It's like being hosted by a king. You kind of feel like a king if you're hosted by a king. So that's like the feeling that I'm seeking to give my guests.
I think it's actually fantastic that you do focus on the feeling, but it's not, and I, as a guest, want to know that the host has that feeling. But together, our job is the listener,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
a lot of podcasts, you'll find that the host has an agenda, the guest has an agenda,
Mm.
and then along
Yeah.
comes the listener and, okay, but it doesn't connect with me. Great. You guys got what you needed out of it. But what gets me, the listener, coming back? So that's the big part is like, does the host, the guest, and the listener feel seen, responded to? Can they connect with what we're having a conversation about? It's our conversation, but we're sharing it. So we want to make sure
Yeah.
it's connecting with them.
Yeah. And I've had the opportunity to interview multiple guests, and I've interviewed certain guests multiple times. And I noticed that for certain reasons, depending on how, uh, what's the word? I don't want to use the word feel, but depending on how the conversation, it takes two to tango, how they feel comfortable and easy sharing those insights, sharing those stories, which is the actual thing that the listeners are there for, versus just rambling off theory and static point. The same guest, right?
Yeah.
And then they feel so comfortable, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I remember," and then we laugh and we talk about it. And the listeners listen to the episode and is like, "Oh, I really love what she talks about." So that's really really inspiring. And then versus them not feeling comfortable and under the stress, people just start uh, quickly saying all the next tips and the next thing they could say, rather than being comfortable to actually let them be comfortable enough to actually let them their personality shine and their story shine.
Yeah. And two, like having the listener feel included.
Yeah.
The listeners for your show, uh, they're podcasters or most of them are podcasters. So,
Yeah.
how do they feel about what we're talking about?
Yeah. Question: how do they feel? I guess we'll never know. Comments how you feel wherever you're listening on, and so we can. I love when we do the follow-up episodes. We could read the comments and the reviews, so the messages, and I really get to hear from you rather than just imagining and assuming what you feel.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Uh,
I
uh,
in doing my homework, I found that a lot of your guests, they started podcasting for a reason.
yeah.
They had some burning passion, and either they were healing for something, or they were wanting to help others heal, either before or after they healed, or just as a result of their content. And why did you start yours?
Why did I start my podcast? Why did I start this podcast, or why did I start podcasting?
Yeah, both.
Okay. Okay, I'll start with the easier one. Why I started this podcast. I noticed that a lot of the advice out there in terms of podcasting is it could be a random guy or a random lady sharing tips and strategies about podcasting, which there's nothing wrong with that. But I was like, wait a minute. It would be nice to actually hear from the people who are actual podcasters, the everyday regular podcasters that actually doing the podcast, and actually hear what it's like being a podcaster, actually hear their story versus a guy who's just giving tips and theories. It's good, but it's just there, it's theory. And that's why I started the podcast, my podcast story. That's for my podcast story.
Were
And
you curious about other podcasters? What was it, the
yeah, I am.
curiosity? Yeah.
I'm curious about other podcasters, and I love to meet podcasters. I just love that form of podcasting. And earlier on, you said podcasting as a networking of steroids, and I found that podcasting is just a crazy way to network with people. I'm talking to you now, and you're calling from the other part of the world, and here we are talking.
Yeah, it's crazy that you're in Nigeria and we're 7 hours apart time-wise, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's crazy. It's fantastic too.
Yeah, it is. And I'm trying to think of other scenarios where we could have been having this conversation. And I really can't think of something that would have been easier as it is now.
Yeah. No, it's great. Technology, it can be amazing.
Yeah, it can be amazing, except when you needed to do the thing you needed to do, like in your case.
Well, like in my
Uh,
situation where I want to keep a little
yeah,
bit of my privacy, so
yeah. And then
Yeah.
it's like, oh, no, no, we don't do that here. I was like, no, 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 we don't do that. Yeah. So you're doing the case study, and you're applying the strategies, and eventually, you would then kind of a report of what's worked, what's changed, and how long since you started working with these three podcasters?
So these three podcasters this is just the beginning, right? So
Okay.
my podcasting started, I would say 2019.
Wow.
Yeah. And I got into podcasting just because I was already doing interviews with individuals and sharing it on my social platforms, and found that podcasting was just the next natural thing to do, because for me, all it was one more place to upload content I was uploading anyway. And
Yeah.
so for me, it was a marketing strategy to help expose these individuals to in another avenue or another vein. It wasn't like it was today. They don't back then. We didn't have a bunch of AI bots out there copying our content or scraping our identities or doing any of those things. And I did enjoy it a lot, but I made a lot of mistakes. And I got very overwhelmed.
Ooh. Well, what was the is there a specific thing that's made you overwhelmed?
Well, I overwhelmed and discouraged, to be honest.
Okay.
So podcasting wasn't hard for me. I loved the conversations. I didn't like living behind a computer all the time.
Okay.
And that was one thing. I created probably 5 or 6 podcasts instead of just sticking with one. And then as I met more people who needed help with their content, I ended up creating production. So I offered to do podcast production for them.
Okay.
And I also did coaching. So part of being a podcaster is creating your online presence and personal branding
Yeah.
sometimes, depending on the angle. But there was also visibility strategies, some that match with how to create a podcast that connects with your audience. So moving away from it was partly overwhelm. The other part was I had a hard drive crash, and intellectual property was lost, and it was
Ooh.
devastating for me. And what was
Yeah.
happening is I was taking stuff off of my computer, putting it on a hard drive so I didn't lose it off my computer. Well, and then the hard drive crashed. So
Ooh.
it's not on my computer, it's on my hard drive, and it crashed. And then I also had the realization that, one day I might not be here. And then
Hmm.
what happens to all this content that I've created? All that time and energy that I'd put into creating a podcast, putting out content, engaging with individuals, where was it going to go? What was going to happen to it? Nobody was going to take it over.
Yeah.
So the podcast that I had that was doing the best, actually, I gave it away.
What do you mean give it away?
Well, I had a guest host come on and interview a few people on my behalf, and they seemed to be enjoying it a lot more than I was at the time. So I gave it to them.
Okay. And so have they been consistent over the past 2 years
Oh,
since you
yeah.
took the break?
And they enjoy it very much.
Oh,
Yeah. So it's
yeah.
continued on, and it's probably done better than I did with it. And it was just a place in time in my life where all of these things happened, the overwhelm, the hard drive crash, and then the need to remove myself from online. I had a
Yeah.
personal situation where I needed to take all my stuff down. The part of the problem with creating online presence is you're easily found.
Yeah.
And when you don't want to be found, all that stuff's got to come down.
Prior to having these conversations, uh, I have not entertained the thought of what happens if I don't want to be found.
Yeah. So being very careful about what goes out related to you, personal information, your face, your voice, those things make it very easy for somebody to steal your identity or find you.
In your case, it was
Everything leaves a digital footprint, right? Everything
yeah,
from the platform you're using to do your podcast, your computer ID, your phone number, your email address, all these things have a digital footprint.
crazy. And what's different now? Now that you're back with the podcast,
To be a little
what's
bit more
different?
careful about, what goes out and where it goes out and how, and still have all those valuable conversations.
Yeah,
I still want to connect with people. I still want to add value. I still want to contribute. But how do I do it in a way where I'm not at risk? That's it. That's the idea that sits with me. It's like, yes, I want to give. How do I protect myself so I can do that?
yeah. I'm curious. Have you started doing podcast coaching?
I did do podcast coaching. Yeah.
Yeah, like I mean, after the break now.
It's coming back. It's just coming back
Okay,
now. I'm just
okay.
starting
And
back into it.
I'm a little bit curious on how that will play out. Let's say you were coaching me as a podcast coach.
Mm.
Would you be coaching via video or audio only?
It depends on the relationship. Like if I already know you, that's different than if I just meet you randomly. And
Right.
whether or not we're recording the content and distributing it for other people.
Okay.
Like when I did coaching before, I did visibility strategies, and the part of that arrangement when I was coaching was I would discount the coaching session if they agreed to let the content be produced and shared.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that's there's all kinds of options there.
Okay. Okay.
But I guess it's one
That's
of those things, just like every individual is unique, every conversation's unique, every relationship in that regard could also be unique. I'm not interested in the cookie cutter packages or, this is the only service I offer and take it or leave it.
yeah. Your people would find you.
Well, and I believe the great conversations would decide what that needed to look like.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. You mentioned that in the near future you'll be starting a new podcast. Could you give me a little insight on what that would look like? What's the podcast about? What's the idea you know, you're ruminating on?
Well, I haven't actually picked the angle yet.
Okay, I'm putting you on the hot seat now. I,
Yeah, really. No,
uh,
I haven't actually picked the angle yet. But it would be, under the JL Palmer Consulting. And
to
if
get,
like you mentioned previously, it'd be easy to rebrand at some point if it was necessary.
yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So would it be to get clients for the business, or would it just be a different, completely outrageous podcast on a different niche that people would be surprised when they hear that? Oh yeah, so you do this stuff? You have a podcast about this? Wow, wow! It's just I didn't I couldn't just put one and one together. Like no, I didn't expect that you would have a podcast.
I know,
It's
I know where you're going. I mean, personal branding and niche marketing and all these wonderful things, right? But I think every part of me has to be a part of it and
yeah,
still keeping me private. So it'll have to be as unique as I am, I guess, and offer who I am to those that I meet. It's like
it's
every conversation I have, it'll be,
yeah.
just open conversations about topics that we decide. I mean, I'm using Podmatch to do agency work. So creating profiles for both hosts and guests and connecting them on podcasts.
Yeah,
And
it's good you
so,
mentioned that.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
it's good you mentioned that. I would love for us to talk about that before we do that. With the kind of podcast you're talking about, it will be a great podcast because when people see that a lot of people want to be on podcast, but they're concerned about putting their stuff online the way you are concerned about putting your stuff your content online. And so when you're a podcast host that you consider digital privacy first and foremost. So it allows you to get people with crazy stories and really, really good stories that in otherwise traditional kinds of podcasts, they would not be comfortable sharing it there. So that's an advantage for you in a
Well, and
sense.
I want to be careful too, because I can overwhelm myself very easily. But there will be one that's more, dedicated to services I can offer or ways that I can help. And then,
Okay.
if I really want to get fanatical about digital footprint, keeping myself anonymous, which this
Okay.
definitely is not. I mean, this is, no, my face is not necessarily out there, and no, my voice might not be the same, and I'm not going to share where I live and, family matters. But
Yeah.
um, there are ways to make a completely anonymous podcast. And so I'm in the middle of researching what those are and seeing
Yeah.
what's possible out there. I mean, they get to the point of being paying cash and buying a debit card, like a Visa or debit card that you can use so that there's no tracing of and VPNs and all and like Patron type email accounts so that they're not tracked by Google and all these, there's all kinds of ways to do it.
Yeah.
And so I'm
That
just
would that would be that would be
researching
lovely. When you
it.
let me just because this is my year of asking questions.
Yeah.
When you when you do that research, I would love for you to um do a webinar on that, right? With the slides, the screen shares and all that. Because I'm thinking of a series where I invite experts to teach a very specific skill in terms of podcasting. And yeah, so I'm pitching the idea. I'll follow up with the documentations and all the emails later on. So,
Well,
so yeah,
let's definitely revisit it. I'd be
I've
happy
done a
to.
lot of asking. You should ask me for something. Like I've asked you to be a follow up guest on this podcast. I've asked you to give a webinar presentation. Uh, like you should ask me something. Yeah. Quick break. Before we continue, I'd love to invite you to join the My Podcast Story newsletter. Each week, I share highlights from our guest stories, behind the scenes podcasting tips, and resources to help you grow your own show. You can sign up at mypodcaststory.com/join. That is mypodcaststory.com/join. Now, let's get back to the episode.
Okay, so tell me how this podcast, does it make you money? You doing this podcast?
Oh, this podcast? Your question you asked if this podcast make me money. Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. No, not yet. Not yet.
So is that what you would like it to do?
Yeah, I'm working on that. Just the same way you, in a sense, I wouldn't really say you're working on that. I mean, you're already doing it. Yeah. Yeah. The
So
reason I started this podcast, okay, you go
no, go
ahead.
ahead. Why did you said you started?
The reason I started this podcast was like, okay, interviewing podcasters in actual podcasters that actually have a podcast would help me absorb like a sponge as many things that are happening in the industry, because now I'm asking everybody, I'm like, okay, yeah, you grew your podcast. What did you do? And I'm learning all the things and from actual people versus just Googling online and say how to grow a podcast, and that for me was more like a research project. And then I was like, let's just make it a podcast, amongst many other reasons. That was like part of the reason, okay, let's do it like this. Right. So if the format is peculiar, it's not just this or that. I try to talk to only podcast hosts and people in the podcast industry.
So you're self-educating by having conversations with educated people.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
guess you could say that.
Yeah. And how are you finding it?
It's lovely. It's fantastic. Other than the editing part and all that, but I guess that's a necessary evil we have to deal with. But I love podcasting. It's getting easier with the editing, in terms of the AI tools out there. Yeah.
Have you had a large learning curve?
Right. No. It's not. I understand the. Have I had a large learning curve? I'm not sure I understand that question.
In the last year, so you hadn't podcasted before maybe a year ago.
I did podcast 5 years ago, but I just don't count that.
You don't count it.
Yeah, it was more like an on and off. It was a Morse code.
But I mean, you're a solo podcaster, right? You do all your own production.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess we
Yeah,
could. Yeah, I am. Yeah,
yeah. So you've had
I
to
do it.
learn all of that.
Yeah, yeah, I have. I've had to do that.
So if you were to say like three things that were your top three things that you hope every podcaster would know, what would they be?
Number one will be you get to make the rules. And the reason I say that is that sometimes people ask, oh, how should I publish episodes? I've interviewed podcasters that they drop an episode every month and they've been doing it for 17 years and they have listeners and they have a working podcast and they have a business out of the podcast and they're crushing it. So you get to make the rules and that's one. The second is uh for interviews, well, okay, for interview podcasters, podcasters that interview guests, to make them understand that they're a spotlight, right? And a spotlight does its best job by spotlighting someone and not the spotlight in events, you don't get to look at the spotlight. If you do that, the light is just too bright for your eyes. So, it's great when you spotlight on someone because I see some podcasters and they invite a guest on the podcast, and instead of allowing the guest to shine and their story to shine, they end up wanting to, like, how do I say this now? It becomes a solo episode even though there's a guest. And I'm like, why didn't you just do a solo episode where you share your story and we just listen to you rather than you brought this amazing guest and you don't even get to allow the guest talk. So
Yeah,
that's
it's
two.
it's not an exchange. Yeah.
Yeah. The third one would be you can either give yourself an excuse for doing the podcast or you can give yourself an excuse for not doing the podcast. The reason I say that is that I've interviewed hosts, right? That they have speaking difficulties, right? I've spoken to a guest that has a I don't know what they call it, left clat palate. I don't know how they say it, but I've spoken to another guest that I had to spend all my listening skills were tested. They were pushed to the extreme to listen to her, and she had a podcast and she had an audience. And sometimes I hear people tell that, oh, I'm not really articulate. I don't really get to ask questions. I'm like, what are you saying? Like, so that's just an excuse for not doing the thing. And that's amongst many other lessons, but that's as the three core lessons I would just easily give if I had 10 seconds.
Aw. You sound like a very patient individual.
Hmm. Why am I smiling? That's a compliment, but I'm not so sure that. Yeah,
You
yeah.
can't put an I am in front of that one?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the context, right? Like,
Mm.
I sound, but sometimes when I'm always thinking and asking myself, how can I do it faster? How can I do it easier, right? And
Mhm.
and sometimes I feel like I'm just too impatient when it comes to that. And this is relates to editing, right? And I'm like, okay, how do I make the episodes? How do I edit the episodes such that I only edit what's necessary. By edit what's necessary, what I mean is, there are instances where, let's say, you had a dog and all through the meeting, the dog was just barking and we
Mm.
couldn't hear anything, or there was a police siren. They just, and all those things. Those happens in rare occasions. But other than that, once we start the interview and we end the interview, it's just a question of just leveling up the audio and making it sound better, and that's all. And I really don't have to remove anything except in rare case scenarios where sometimes the guest has to step away to maybe get water or something like that, and then
Oh
I
my
don't want to,
god.
yeah, and that happens, and I don't want to keep my listeners. I don't want to have them, listen for 2 minutes with no sound. I mean, that's right. I respect their time. I wouldn't want to waste somebody's 2 minutes. There's really nothing there. Yeah,
I
right.
mean, a
So
30-second pause for a reason, that's not
no,
necessarily bad.
that's no, that's different.
Yeah.
We have conversations like it's like if we're talking like in real person and you're talking to me and you just pause and you breathe in and I can see you that you're trying to catch your breath and you're trying to just let what I've said sink in and respond. That's part of the whole experience. But if you for some reason decide to maybe use the restroom and then for some other things you spend an extra 15 minutes, if I had the option to delete that 15 minutes of that thing happening, I would delete it. And so I use that frame of reference to say, does it add to the experience? And then if it doesn't, I remove it. Or if someone is calling you, right, so while we're having a conversation, and you had to like pick the call, let's say maybe a member of your team had, something came up. That doesn't really add to the experience, of my conversation in real person. And if I had the opportunity to just maybe swipe my fingers and that call won't come through, and we'll just have that conversation, I'll do that. And so when it comes to editing, I'm like, okay, this guest's phone rang out loud during the conversation, and they had to like tell the person to stop calling and stuff like that, and I remove it. But other than that, I don't do too much of editing where I remove every as and situation.
I actually, right here, I invite your audience actually to share if they're a podcaster, if they've ever had a situation where somebody had said, I'll be right back. And they've
Yeah.
actually said, you know what? I can't wait for them to come back. I didn't allow for this pause here and hung up.
That's crazy. That's crazy. I know one of my earliest interviews, the guest, Eda's brother's wife, which is I guess his sister-in-law, was pregnant at the time. And I think while we were having that interview, she was kind of due. And so when he was doing the interview, he was so excited. He got a call and he was like, wow, I think I'm gonna be an uncle.
Oh,
And
wow.
so that was like that was an experience, it was an interruption, but it was an experience, and that stays with the podcast versus something else happening.
Well, I wanted to share, that a lot of podcasters use podcasting as a very big tool to build their businesses. I
Yes.
know when I was doing podcasting before, I used it as to sell my marketing services. I used it as a lead generator to meet people that I could coach.
Yeah.
And I used it for content for my platforms so that, I wouldn't have to go out there and create outside of an interview I'd already had. I could share the conversation and add value, share knowledge, both sides of, but I'd also, would share an offer with my guest, either in the podcast or privately before or
Yeah.
after the interview, and say, hey, if you want to explore anything more about what we've talked about or see how my services can help you, I'd be open to that conversation,
Yeah.
and that's, you know, one easy way if you wanted to share your skills and with other people and turn this podcast of yours into a business.
Yeah. That's what I'm currently doing right now, and I think I've had one person book a time for a consult call, and yeah, I'm really optimistic to. I'm looking forward to that call. It's crazy you mentioned this because the guy I talked about, his brother's wife giving birth. This the same thing he recommended when I
Yeah.
interviewed him, and he was like, he they started a podcast interviewing their target audience. So what that means is that if I wanted to do podcasting production and all that for coaches, I could start a podcast that gets me to interview coaches, right? And that just makes it easy because then when you talk to them, you're like, oh yeah, that's true. Do you have a podcast? Yeah, I could help you with this, and they're like, oh yeah, sure, let's do that.
I think the one caution there that, once you do make that shift, and I found when I was doing, what I was doing that I gave away and 2 years ago, was that you can get too narrow. And
Mm,
then what happens is everything's just a lead magnet. And
oof.
instead of being, and I don't get me wrong, I didn't go full in there, but there were some conversations where, I was asked to be a guest, or somebody wanted to be interviewed, and it was like, it's just not a good fit. And they're for my business, and I think sometimes their valuable conversations are lost.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's so true. That's so true. And then you now start looking at uh, how do I make more money versus how do I actually get conversations? How do I actually talk to people and connect with people versus how do I actually share inspiring stories?
Yeah.
It's not like, okay, is this person that I can potentially work with? No, I'm not going to interview them.
And then too, a part of it could be that the conversation gets so narrowed to the point where you're not actually having a valuable conversation. You're just pitching, or you're just delivering, or trying to
Yeah.
persuade, or trying to create, enough. I'm knowledgeable about this. You have to hire me, kind of a focus.
Yeah, it's a sales call. Yeah, it's a sales call.
Yeah,
And it's sales call we call podcast.
that's not a podcast conversation.
That's a sales call.
You're so worried about passing on your education that you don't take the time to have an actual conversation.
Yeah. I think the way I look at it is getting people to just know me and
Yeah.
know what I do. And if they need my services, they hire me. If not, but I just it's like how do I explain? It's like the people who know us personally, I want them to know what I do, right? I'm not trying to sell to them. Like I want my mom, my dad to know that okay, this is what I do. But I'm not like, oh, dad, you have to buy this thing from me. But I'm like, okay, this is what I do. I'm podcasting. So that when he's talking with a friend and he's like, oh yeah, that's true. My son does podcasting. Oh, you say you want to start a podcast? Well, maybe you can talk to my son, right? And it's not like he's getting a commission or any of those things. It's just that he knows someone who does this thing, right? Because he knows someone, he doesn't really know what I do. And you could have your friend and someone you interviewed who's struggling or looking for someone to help them with their podcast, and they don't even know that you do that, right? So I see it as a question of getting people to know you rather than oh, right? When I pitch these ideas to my guests, I think of it as advocacy, right? I'm like, how can I help them, right? Rather than how can I make more money? And sometimes helping people could be having great conversations, commending things to them. Like I had a guest who was about starting the podcast and he was asking me, what software should I use for recording? And I was like, oh yeah, this is the one I use, right? We had a great conversation. He knows that I help people do podcast production. And who knows, 6 months from now, 1 year from now, he goes, oh yeah, that's true. I know a guy who does this. You should talk to him, right?
Yeah, and staying in touch.
Yeah.
You talked about conferences and going to conferences, and how you get to know people. And I don't know if that was before we started recording or not, but I sometimes I found I had a really hard time with this in the beginning when I was doing networking. I would
Yeah.
go to these networking events and I would meet all kinds of people, and I would listen a whole lot,
Okay.
and they never really ever learned anything about me.
Yeah. Yeah, you just soak in value, you're not offering anything in return.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to shove it down your throat, but I need to eat. So, could you ask me a question about me, please? Or maybe.
Are you a comedian? The way you said it, like it's so funny. Like I don't want to shove it down your throat, but I need to eat.
Oh,
I love this. I love this episode. Oh, that's crazy. Yeah, I think we go into the conversation thinking, how do I make a sale versus how
yeah.
can I help? With podcasting and with the work I do, I help people create a platform of impact,
There you go.
influence, and then of also income. Eventually, right? That's what I help people do, right? And so when,
Eventually.
yeah, well, let's take it one step at a time. We need to count one before count two,
Yeah.
right? And when I say it that way, and I see someone who has expertise and he's struggling, like the person I spoke to yesterday, who booked a call for the clarity to see how we can work together, if I can help her, and if we're aligned, and then we will talk about those things. She's a coach. She's been doing this for over 25 years. That's a very long time. But she struggles with the tech, and and that gets in the way of her sharing a message, being authentic self. She knows and she's good at what she does. But all those other things just gets in the way, and it shouldn't be the case. And so I'm like, well, how can I help her? Right?
Mhm.
And so when I see it that way, it's no longer uh uh you should buy my products, right? No, I was like, oh no. You mentioned you wanted to start a podcast ever since. I actually help people to launch their podcast and without having to, I position it well. She's like, oh wow, that's crazy. I've been thinking about starting a podcast. I was like, oh wow, we should talk and let's see how I can help you bring that idea to life. Right? We didn't talk about money, but eventually we'll get to that conversation.
Yeah.
You see now it's a question of I'm partnering with them to bring the idea to life versus, well, that's true. I produce podcasts. Give me your podcast, let me produce them. And they're like, you don't even ask questions to really understand what did your line, what's happening, what's going on, what's their vision, what's their dream. How does your own vision of making money and also helping podcast launch connect into their dream and vision so that you guys become partners?
And that's really, really important. The
Yeah, it is.
connecting, like, you wanna work with people you connect with.
Yeah, and people want to work with people that it's obvious that they care and they're not just seeing
Yeah.
you. And when they see your head, they see dollar sign.
That's
And they're like, oh, I was like, oh yeah. I was like, oh, they see grain. I was like, instead of seeing the face of GL, they're like, oh yeah, Benjamin, Benjamin, Benjamin.
I can see this dollar sign with legs and arms and
Yeah,
walking
yeah, and when you're smiling, like in this case, I see the dollar sign smiling. I was like, wow, that's the dollar. I'm gonna get a lot of money this month. The
Yeah.
dollar sign is happy.
I mean, we all the world revolves around it. There's no doubt about it. But we do get
Yeah,
to choose, whether or not we want to enjoy how we earn it. And not a lot of
yeah.
people believe that.
What do you mean when you say not a lot of people believe that?
Not a lot of people believe that we get to choose the way we earn it so that we can
Yeah,
enjoy it.
yeah. Of course we do. Everything is a choice, right? And one of the things I jokingly say is that I mean, I want to make money, but if I don't care about what I do in terms of making money, I would have been probably doing fraud or any of those things to make money, right? But I care about the work itself. I want to do work that I'm at the end of the day. Someone launched a podcast, they impact people's life, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm happy that I was able to work on that podcast. Like
Yeah.
I love that. It's the same way some people want to help people who are sick, right? And the doctors and say, oh yeah, I'm happy that in the worst times of their life I was able to help them. And different capacity. People have their own the things that give them joy. I love to help people bring their message to life, right? And yeah, when it's I think too much brainwashing of the sales. You have to ask for the sale and all that, and I'm like, not really, right? Not really. Nobody likes to be sold to.
No, we don't like to be sold to, but we do like to connect with people we want to work with.
Yeah, yeah. People are all concerned about themselves, right? And that's a good thing in a way because now instead of looking at going on the conference and I'm like, yeah, and like how can I give a I don't go to a lot of conference. Like personally, I consider it a waste of time.
Especially when you can podcast,
Yeah, yeah,
connect with
it's crazy.
people.
I should I should be going to conferences, but I don't go to a lot of conferences. I can count the number of conferences I've gone to in one hand, and but if I was to go to a conference as a podcaster, I would go there and I would interview every um, speaker, I mean, and every like I would interview them and share their story and get them to come on my podcast. And so instead of oh yeah, you're great, awesome, I would say how can I start? How can I start pulling threads of partnership, right? And I could do a 30 seconds interview. Or, how do you make money with your podcast? That's if it's a podcasting conference, and I could get those names. I compile it, send it to them, and then I was like, "Oh, I really love that stuff you talked about making money from doing this with your podcast. I'd love for us to do like a longer interview." And then they say yes and they come on the podcast. And eventually we're building connection, building partnership. And if we're aligned, you're like, oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, you do this thing with TikTok ad agency. I really want to get into that space. What would it look like working with you, right?
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that's fantastic. Just the approach is different, you know?
Yeah, yeah. You want to. I mean, you know this, that it feels more rewarding when you're working with people that care about the work you do as much as you do care about the work, right? So you don't want to work with someone who is doing a podcast because you probably force them that podcasting is the brilliant idea, it would change their life and all that, and they're like, I don't really know, right? Versus someone who really understands podcasting in depth. I'm like, yeah, I know podcasting is a long game, and yeah, and you're like, right? And so they understand, they care about it, and when you're working with them, when you provide great work for them, they see it, and it's just better, right?
It is better, way better.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just looking at the time, and it's crazy what happens when you're having a great conversation
Can
and
you
listen to
believe it?
people.
We've been
Yeah, and then
chatting
like, oh
for
wow.
over an hour.
Yeah, that's it's really amazing. There was a question I was about to ask you, and then another question popped up, and I wanted you to tell me about the guest agency, the JL Palmer Consulting. I've been having conversation with someone on the platform before you came on the podcast. I'm curious, was that you or was it someone else?
Was the conversation that you had earlier?
Yeah, yeah, on Podmatch and via the
Oh, yeah.
email and all that.
So the so I started with my own profile
Okay,
as an agent, right? And then I'm attracting other people to manage their profiles and guesting as well.
okay. And how I need to catch my breath. How do you do the attracting? How do you get people to?
Well, it'll be on podcasts like this, and it will
Okay.
be through social media.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And just
Oh,
my own connections. Like, I know several podcasters that have really never guested.
that's crazy.
Yeah, and
Yeah. Like
there's several businesses that, have their own podcasts, but they don't get on other podcasts, or
yeah.
they have businesses, but they don't promote their businesses or share about their businesses because promote is one of those words. But they don't share about their business on podcasts, and it's quite, like I say, networking on steroids. So
Yeah.
busy people can reach more people by getting on podcasts. I mean, everybody can. Authors, I don't care who you are, you can have a conversation on a podcast, and it either for your business or personally. Like
Yeah.
I got some severe anxiety issues. I don't have to have a business. I don't have to have a podcast to get on another podcast and talk about those, and hopefully it helps somebody.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we could even get into the benefits of guesting. Like, there's so many. I've had guests who they go on podcasts because they want to get better at talking, right, speaking,
Yeah.
right, answering questions, communicating their message, refining their message, really. Because it's easy to say, "Oh, this is the business I do," or "This is why I do what I do." But when you get on a podcast and they ask you, "Oh, what do you actually do with this stuff?" and you're like, oh, that's true. That's true. I've never really thought about it that way. And then eventually, when you do multiple of these, you then have the stories to share. And then when you get on stages and you're like, oh yeah, it's like fantastic. You've been doing this for a while. Wow, that's awesome. I was like, no,
That's what
I get it off testing around.
That's what they say, make more mistakes faster, have more conversations faster. You wanna refine
Yeah.
your message? Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing I love about guesting is that you don't get to do all those work of producing, editing, and all that, right? You just show up, be awesome, and when the episode comes out, you can share.
You just show up and be awesome, and you can be not
Yeah,
so awesome too, and you get the producer will make
yeah,
you like you are.
yeah. Because a lot of time when people want to create content, the objections they have is um it's strange reading to the camera and recording and you just saying and talking on how do I talk to camera and be confident and all that, and eventually I say that everybody has their corporate side, right? And I don't know if you've watched these corporate videos where, like, okay, what's an example of a corporate video? Welcome to the Podnovation. In today's episode we will talk about what it means to start a podcast, right? and
They're
it's
training
different.
videos. Yeah. They're
Yeah, training videos.
training education.
It's official,
Yeah. It's like you're taking
right?
a course.
Yeah, exactly. That I think that's gets triggered when you turn on the camera. But when you're doing interviews and I'm talking to you, you're talking to me, and it's casual, it's natural, and people get that feel when they listen to the content, and it converts better because it's not. Oh, welcome to the restaurant. And the first thing you need to do is this.
So there's this little thing about growth, right? And
Yes.
they say more content, more content. It's not about volume, it's about depth and connection,
Hmm. Okay. Okay. It's not
right?
about volume. It's about
No, it's
depth
not
and
about
connection.
volume.
It's,
So
I don't.
the growth of a
Okay.
podcast or even in a conversation with an individual, if they're loud and overbearing, do you connect with them? No. So if somebody's out there putting out more of the same and it doesn't connect, it's not going to help them grow.
Yeah.
So there it is. The growth is not in the volume, it's in the depth and connection.
Okay. What if we had depth and connection and volume?
That's fantastic.
Okay.
Fantastic. But volume, how do you mean? When you say volume, do you
Okay.
like quantity?
Okay. Yeah, that's one. Oh, I see. When you say volume, you're talking about the volume of the sound volume. Oh,
Yeah,
I
that's
get.
what I was saying.
I
There's two
meant
different.
quantity.
Yeah, there's two different volumes, like either how loud you are or how loud something is, or how much of. But quality over quantity, depth and connection over volume.
Yeah, I think the idea of just posting content for posting sake is not enough, right? It's like giving a speech. You want to make sure that the people you're talking to, they actually resonating with them.
Yeah. And it's like this. It's like getting on podcasts and refining your story. Unless you start putting content out, you don't learn how to do it, right?
Yeah, and
There's that.
with podcasts, you do get feedback, and you
Yeah.
don't have to start from scratch because now you're just boring other people's audience. You're talking to a podcaster who will be doing it for 2, 3, 4 years, and they have their audience, and you just focus on your story, your expertise, and all that, and you share your message. So rather than saying, "How do I get 20 views? How do I get 50 people to listen?" They already have the people, and you just need to share your message.
Well, and the what to share, like, because sometimes you need to change your message.
Yeah, depending on the
Also,
people you're talking to.
yeah, and sometimes you think you've got this audience and you don't. And just because you have
Yeah,
views doesn't mean you've connected the way you intend to connect.
yeah,
And
yeah,
no connection, so no views, no audience. Um, that's also that speaks volumes too, in the sense that it tells you something's missing.
yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. Wow. Thank you so much, Gio. This has been such a lovely conversation, talking to you. And I do so many of these interviews that I really have great conversations, but I want to follow up and I want to continue conversations after the interview. But I do so much interviews that I don't have a system, and that's something I've been putting on my to-do list to like have a system to actually reach out to guests even after the interviews and say, what's going on, how you doing? Happy birthday. And it's been 6 months since we interviewed. How's things over on your end? And if you do have suggestions for me, that would be lovely.
I do. I definitely do.
Okay. Okay, yeah, I'm listening.
And I'm also
Just for context, I've done over 1,000 interviews, so that's a
1,000.
lot. Yeah.
Okay, you're talking about the 5 years, all of it now, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, yahoo!
And not just this podcast. I mean, across multiple podcasts.
So you've had more than one podcast.
Yeah, I have 5 podcasts.
Well, I used to do that. But yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I know where you're at.
yeah,
Oh my
yeah.
gosh. Yeah, yeah, let's talk some more for sure.
Okay, so you're about giving me the keys to the kingdom.
They're back giving it, yeah, it was your kingdom. I thought maybe I'd return them.
Okay, I'm listening.
I can't give you the keys to the kingdom. We're gonna have to do another podcast. Okay, everything in
Uh,
one day.
oh, so that's how it is now. I was pointed. I was like, give me the wisdom and master.
Oh, well, you definitely have enough content to go back through. And if
Yeah,
you thought that you might like me to have a look at some of it and offer some suggestions, I'd be happy to do that. There's all kinds of ways to connect, whether you want to connect with your podcast guests of past, um,
yeah.
through content or one-on-one. There's all kinds of ways to do that. I'm happy to talk about that as well.
Okay. I know I'm asking for. Oh, I can't even ask. I don't even feel comfortable asking questions because I've taken 28 extra minutes of the allocated time, and I'm dying to know those ways. What do I do?
Well, maybe
Uh,
we could work together to share them and share them with your email list.
okay, that would be lovely. If you could, maybe create a guide so that we could swap subscribers. I think I have I don't know. Like right now, I have about um 100 email subscribers. I'm working to like grow that to 1,000 before the year ends. Yeah,
Oh,
but yeah.
so how do you engage them to get them to sign up?
How do I engage them to get them to sign up?
Yeah,
It's crazy. It's unconventional. I I ask my guests. Most of my guests that come on my podcast are my target audience. Like in your case, you've been on the podcast to share your podcast story. You're
yeah.
exactly the kind of person that would listen to my podcast. And so once you finish booking the meeting, it redirects you to the landing page. So I don't auto subscribe my guests. No, I want them to actually choose to say, okay, I'd love to hear podcasting tips from him, and so they subscribe. And yeah, that's how I get them to
Yeah,
subscribe. And then of course the call to action.
we should never auto subscribe anybody.
Yeah, yeah.
That should,
I don't like that being done to me, and so I don't like
yeah,
to do it to someone.
no, and there's a spam act that doesn't allow us to do that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But people, wow, thank you so much. Yeah, I do have a follow-up interview, so that would be lovely.
Yeah,
Um,
well, and
um,
I look forward to other conversations outside of podcasts and what have you.
yeah.
And
It just it, it just occurred to me now. Now that I'm about to ask you for your call to action, where listeners can connect and learn more about the work you do. That I tried visiting your website and it wasn't working.
No, it's still coming. Call to action and website are all still coming. But I will have a. I'm not sure if I'm going to put it together
You
as a like a cheat
you
sheet.
you you could share the website, and then in the future before the episode is released, the website will be live, and then if there's a custom link, you would share it with me. I'll put it in the description so they
Yeah,
can go directly to the cheat sheet.
yeah. I'm going to actually create a cheat sheet that actually goes with my Podmatch profile
Okay.
for interviews that I do, and it's coming. Just couldn't do everything all in one day.
Yeah, yeah, of course, of course,
But
of
the
course.
yeah, well, we'll see what we can do to basically, I'm not going to give it all away, right? I'm going to give enough away that, they can implement a few tools and see what it is that actually works for them and decide whether or not they want some help or if they're happy to do it themselves. Because I'm not about hoarding the information, but
Yeah.
sometimes, we just don't have all the time in the world to do it all by ourselves.
Yeah, and people need an expert, right? There are certain things that you would see, even though you could tell me, what's an example of a popular tip? Message guest, right? That
Yeah.
could be an advice, right? Message guest. But there are certain things. There's a way you see it, and there's a way you coach someone and give feedback. That it's just different and it's faster. And so people would want to do it themselves. People would also want someone to do it with them. And sometimes people would just want you to do it for them and say, okay, your agency, book the guest for me. I don't really want to have to do that stuff. I'm too busy. I have my business to run. I don't want to book in guests. But I want to be on podcast, so do it for me.
Yeah, and there are people that can afford either the time or the money, and there are
Yeah,
those who can't. And so,
yeah,
there's the tools are there if somebody else wants to do the research or if they just want to tap into somebody else who's already done it. And
yeah.
happy to share.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that would be lovely. Just over the course of the conversations, two things you will be having you back on the podcast and for a follow up interview, and for the webinar series that I would be launching anytime soon. But I would make sure I launch it before my birthday, which is July. So I would want to launch it before my birthday so that I can actually get experts to going into details rather
Mhm.
than just, usually online, all you see is how to start a podcast. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's great, but I need someone to show me how can I actually do a podcast anonymously without with my voice and all those case scenarios. There's really no content out there. It's just how to start a podcast. And this, I need something specific.
Or even the contrarian view is, why would you want to start a podcast?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Do you
Thank you
know?
so much. I feel like if I don't end this interview, we could keep going on for maybe the next 3 hours. So let's
Isn't
just end the interview.
isn't that wonderful? That's absolutely
That's it.
fantastic.
Yeah, that's great. Funny thing is, I was a bit anxious for the interview. I was like, I know I've been so comfortable with seeing my guests when I talk to them. I was like, okay, let's see
Oh,
how this goes, and
well,
it went great.
thank you so very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much. I'll put the links. Um, I'll put the links for JL Palmer Consulting in the description, so listeners can click and go directly to the site. It's been an absolute delight chatting with you, JL.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It was great.
I That's it for today's episode of my podcast story. I hope you enjoyed listening to this journey as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. If you found value in today's episode, make sure to subscribe and leave a review. It really helps others discover the show. And don't forget to join the newsletter at mypodcaststory.com/join for more stories and podcasting insights. Until next time, keep telling your story because someone out there needs to hear it.